Welcome to our Lunchtime Live program on WJEJ, a partnership once a month with the Washington County Public School System. We're here the third Thursday of the month at this time. I'm Will Kaufman from the Public Information Office, joined today by Bryan Johnson, our Supervisor of Transportation, and Emily Jones from our Student Services Office. First time appearance, ladies and gentlemen, so please welcome her warmly. She's a pupil personnel worker and the coordinator of home and hospital teaching in student services, but we'll take a good broad look from her corner and from the Office of Student Services about getting ready for the start of school. We are just a couple of weeks away, as we're doing the show live, from the start of the school year in Washington County, the day after Labor Day. We're going to talk about many angles to that, but certainly specifically transportation and what Student Services does, not only in preparing for the year, but once the year begins and continues. Today's show is sponsored by the Columbia Bank, always supporting Lunchtime Live and public education here in Washington County. Bryan, Emily, welcome.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good to see the both of you. Bryan, we'll start with you since we have to actually get the kids to school in order to teach them and to provide them services. How has the summer gone so far in preparation for a new school year?
Our summer in transportation is always very busy. It's not at all a downtime. We're continuously evaluating our routes and making the appropriate adjustments. Of course, every year we receive thousands of TLCs, those transportation location change forms. A reminder that those are due this Friday to be processed for the first day of school. So we have to get all that in there and get everything up and ready to go, in addition to making sure our buses are well maintained and ready to go as well. So it's been a very busy summer, but we're going to be ready to go.
Let's do the stats. How many buses? How many drivers? How many when the doors are ready to open that day, how many kids are you transporting?
Well, we're running about, I would say, 150 of our regular buses, and then you can add another 30 lift buses to that. So that's 180 buses that are running every AM and PM. Then on top of that, there's numerous trips to our technical high schools. The Barbara Ingram School for the Arts is running, and the many field trips that we run each day. So that comes down to about, there's going to be about 22,000 students out there. I'd say at least 19,000 of them are going to be transported on a school bus. And then we have many others that are non-transported or coming to school with different methods.
It wasn't downtime even for the buses and the drivers this summer. There was some activity with summer school activities, right?
We do run some summer school activities on a much lower scale. So for the majority of our drivers, I think they took at least a little breather from their everyday activities. We will see them all next Thursday when they have their required state in-service training to make sure they're up to date. I think a lot of people don't know how qualified their drivers are and how difficult it is to not only have a CDL license, but to drive a school bus with a CDL license.
What's the training involved? How has the training changed? I'm sure it has.
Well, it's not so much that the training has changed. The requirements always change. To be a school bus driver, one, you have to have a clean background. You have to have a clean driving record. You have to go through many hours of pre-service training and behind-the-wheel training to go and even get your CDL. And unlike many positions, it's not a situation where you come in and you interview for a job and you start Monday. Right. That is a long process. It can take months, depending on the availability. So it's our drivers go through quite a rigorous background check and training before they get behind the wheel. You're
consistently on the lookout for drivers, to add to replace, because folks come and go. The need is always there. What makes a good to great school bus driver?
Well, I think we would all agree the first thing is that they have an enjoyment of being around our students, feeling and knowing that they are a valued part of the educational system. I can't stress enough, and if you talk to any of our administrators or teachers, we'll stress it as well. They are the first face that all our students who are riding a bus see in that morning. They can set the tone for a day, and then in the afternoon, just the same. So they play a very important role in our children's lives, and those for you with students in the system who've been around for a while. Many of you have had the same bus driver for years. You probably know them by name and know the fondness for the kids have for the drivers and the drivers have for the kids.
We see it a lot when teachers and other school-based personnel retire after long careers. Many, in some cases, a couple of generations of families will issue salutes, and they're very emotional. It's not unlike that when a school bus driver has had a long career. A lot of friends, a lot of respect, a lot of appreciation from kids, families, adults, when it comes to transporting kids. I love those stories. You hate to see those folks go, but
Right.
I love the testimonials and the emotion about those folks and what they've done for kids and families.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You'll hear those stories. Probably many of our families have those stories themselves. It's also an emotional goodbye when we have some of our drivers who've been here many years retire. In fact, some of them are already coming back as sub-drivers that they may have intended to retire, and it didn't take long for them to say, yeah, I may not be full-time, but I miss the kids even if they're not mine. So you're absolutely right.
Is it more about the changes in the kids than it is in the drivers and the driving and the training?
In terms of what?
In terms of the drivers managing a bus route full of kids. Is it more about having to adjust to, and this sounds like old guy stuff, but the way kids are today compared to, name it, 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Is there anything about that you note as the supervisor of the whole affair, that drivers have more to say about the kids, about behavior, about everything about the kids these days?
You know what? I don't think there's a generation yet that doesn't have something to say about the younger generation. There's certainly been changes in the way students behave. It's a cultural change. It's not a negative thing. We've all experienced that. As a driver, we do provide training on how to properly manage a school bus. You can't necessarily approach it the way you would approach discipline with your own kids, but just like our teachers do, we use positive reinforcement, and we really don't have huge challenges in our school buses. I think there's a little bit of misinformation about that out there. It's not that there can't be challenges from time to time, but it's all about developing relationships with the kids, which our drivers do a very good job of developing that mutual respect, setting rules, which we have on the bus, and then expecting them to be followed. Most of our drivers have incredible rides each day.
The policy committee to the Board of Education recently went through lots of discussions, and then it came to the Board of Education for approval updates to the cell phone policy. How does that, and there's a school bus component to that, how does that apply to what you and the drivers? What about that policy as it applies to school buses?
Sure. You're not going to see really any change to the way cell phones have been used on the school bus. Cell phones are allowed to be used on the school bus with the new policy as long as it's not disruptive to the operations of the bus. In addition, for confidentiality reasons, students can't be recording video, going in inappropriate websites, playing music too loud, any of those kind of things that you would expect. Otherwise, most of our students will pull it out. They may have headphones on. All of that is fine and acceptable, just as long as we're not being disruptive.
Have you had any negative experiences to any great degree with drivers having to manage kids' phones and technology on the buses?
Very, very rarely.
Yeah.
It's usually not. It's not. The cell phone isn't the source of it. It's usually part of a bigger issue that they may be having. Very rarely is the cell phone an issue on the bus.
I just found as the discussions went on, certainly there's much more of a component to the policy changes related to the classroom and in the buildings.
Correct.
But I thought, God, the drivers have enough to worry about. If you're not really thinking clearly through the policy and the basics of it, it feels like it's yet another thing that drivers have to police. But there's not a lot of there's not a lot of policing in it.
No, and that gets back to what I was saying earlier. Our kids are really exceptional kids on the bus. They're not pulling out their cell phones and being disruptive on it. They, for the most part, they know how to use their devices appropriately. They've been around for quite some time now, and I think it's just become a part of who we are.
I don't know if folks are aware, what in the spirit of what if, how about medical emergencies as they may occur on a school bus, either to or from? What is there training for the driver in that regard?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And the very short answer is that all of our drivers are trained to pull over at the nearest safe spot that they can do and call 911 immediately. We do have students that may have specific needs. That's something that would be communicated, if necessary and appropriate, to the driver in advance. And if there's any specific training that we provided for them for that, they would act there. But really, the procedure is going to be to pull the bus over and to contact 911 immediately.
Right. What are the questions you're getting in the office these days?
These days, the questions are, when is the bus routes going to be out? First of all, they're going to be out probably towards the end of next week, I would say Wednesday or Thursday.
Yeah, your office told me, because I have a little piece of this, told me the 21st. That's sort of the target date. Now, that
Right. Yep.
there may be a little bit of shading on that, but we'll shoot for that.
Yes, and I think we'll be pretty close to that. I do encourage everyone to take a moment and go to the Washington County Public School website and click on the school bus locator link and double check everything. As I said earlier, we do review routes over the summer. Things do change, times can change, and one of the biggest areas of confusion at the start of school is when a route has changed, and we're getting phone calls because not even so much the bus stop has changed, but the bus is running 5 minutes later or maybe 10 minutes earlier because of a route change, and because somebody may not have checked that, it can cause confusion. So it's worth taking a look and making sure that everything's in good shape.
Everybody should check.
Everybody should check.
Even if
Yes.
they're confident nothing has changed.
Even if particularly if you're confident nothing has
Yeah,
changed.
exactly. That's probably a word to the wise for all of us on every front. Today's Lunchtime Live program is being sponsored by the Columbia Bank here in Washington County, big supporter of Lunchtime Live and of public education. We're here the third Thursday of the month. Bryan Johnson is Supervisor of Transportation for Washington County Public Schools. Emily Jones is with our Student Services Office as a pupil personnel worker and the coordinator of home and hospital teaching. Tell us about the depth and breadth of student services.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. As you were talking, Bryan, I was thinking about the overlap between our departments. And one of the things that we primarily address as we start a new school year is student enrollment and how critical it is for student enrollment records and documents to be accurate in order to ensure that those bus routes are able to be planned in a timely fashion. And one of the things when students are coming to enroll in Washington County, we need a verification of age, custody, residency, and immunizations. And a parent or guardian has to take that required information to the school in their attendance zone. So like Bryan referenced on our website, we have the boundary map, WCPS boundary map. So any parent that's not sure what school they would be districted for, they just want to go onto our website, enter their address into that boundary map, and that would pop up for them the school that they are districted for. And then they'd want to contact that school and schedule an appointment to go in with their documents for an enrollment. And if there's questions, Student Services is always available to address any enrollment questions. We provide a variety of services through the Office of Student Services, and enrollment is just one piece as we start the school year. But if you have specific questions regarding that, we're available. And I'd also like to speak to Sonia Venegas, who is part of our EL program, and she's an excellent resource located at Pangbourne. And she's providing very individual one-on-one services in terms of enrollment for students where English isn't their primary language. Sonia herself is biliterate and bilingual in Spanish and French, and she's an outstanding resource to connect our students who are just enrolling with us to community supports and resources agencies in our area that will help these students have a successful start to their year.
She actually did the show some months ago and knocked us out.
She's awesome.
There was that for sure, a lot of energy, but a lot of information that day. A lot of information for us here at the radio station, and I think for our listeners. I got a lot of feedback on that show that she's providing information, resources, and just that extra support for folks who may not be as sturdy about a school system anywhere in America, much less here in Washington County. So it was a really good half hour.
Yeah, she's an invaluable asset to student services. We're heavily dependent on her collaboration and Paula Moore as well to ensure that, we're reaching students in a meaningful way. All of our students are able to access the resources that will really lay the foundation for good instruction. And part of that for all of our students is attendance, which is another key piece that Student Services addresses. All children between the ages of 5 and 18 fall under the Maryland Compulsory Attendance Law, which requires that, you must be enrolled in a public or private school or be providing parent teaching in the home. In Washington County, we have excused or unexcused days. After 12 days of absence, we would require official documentation, a medical note, legal excuse. But otherwise, parents have to provide a written note explaining why a student's absent, because as we know, students who attend school do better. If you're not present, you're not able to access your instruction, and that directly impacts kids. By third grade, their literacy is profoundly impacted if they're not able to consistently attend school. And so one of our primary focuses in student services is making sure that all the great curriculum that WCPS teachers strive to give our kids, they're actually present to receive.
It's not just about student services. I think everybody's pulling in that same direction.
It's
probably
absolutely
more so than ever. These recent years has been such an emphasis on getting the kids to school, getting them to come back the next day. Attendance and enrollment and attendance has been a huge focus.
Well, and in collaboration with Bryan's department, again, Amy Selby is a phenomenal resource in his department for our department in terms of collaborating, with the bus routes and getting kids to and from where they need to be. I don't really know what we would do without her. She's phenomenal. And so you see that kind of interdepartmental collaboration that maybe people wouldn't anticipate when they think of student services, but really we're a clearinghouse at our department for many other things. What we do will have great reach into other departments as well. And so, people say, well, what is student services? Well, it's enrollment, it's custody, it's residency, it's truancy, it's anything that you're not sure where it falls. Odds are it will fall under us and we'll be able to direct you to the right resource. And some of our kiddos are coming in and we have all types of enrollments, not just necessarily traditional parent enrollment. We have some things referred to as kinship care. We have formal kinship care where a student may be placed by an agency like the Department of Social Services. And so that might be a type of enrollment we would need to do. We also have informal kinship care. And some of the reasons for informal kinship care may be there was a death of a legal parent or guardian, a parent may be seriously ill or have a drug addiction, they could be incarcerated, or it could be something as simple as they're on active military deployment. So informal kinship care is another alternative to enrollment that we offer through student services to ensure that kiddos are able to get into school. We also coordinate special permission through the special permission facilitator is Gail Ortega. She also coordinates parent teaching, does an outstanding job.
When you do explain, not for us, but for the listeners, explain special permission.
Okay, so special permission is when a custodial parent or guardian can request permission for a student to attend another school in the WCPS attendance area. So sometimes there may be reasons that, a student would be a better fit at another school. Maybe there's a particular academic program that's offered that maybe in their school of residence isn't offered, so they would apply for special permission. Childcare is a common reason for special permission up through the age of 13. Parents can request special permission if there's a daycare provider outside of their residency. So those are the types of things that we look at in terms of special permission. Like I mentioned just briefly in regards to Amy and her help with transportation, we also have students in transition, which are students who may be experiencing homelessness. And we have a coordinator, Dana Pentney, and she makes sure that students are able to access educational opportunities and they get linked into services in the school and community. Dana works relentlessly, tirelessly, sincerely to ensure that all of our students that are experiencing that kind of uncertainty are best able to get in touch with the resources they need to be successful.
Yeah, when Dana did the show, first of all, just boundless energy.
Yeah.
Secondly, I felt blessed that she actually had a half an hour to do the show, considering the work that she does. And on the downside, the numbers that she has in her jurisdiction,
Staggering.
I thought were alarming.
Yes.
That and it's a reflection of any number of things. And she busts her tail, to put things together for individual situations with resources from every imaginable corner. It was an enlightening show, somewhat troubling for most of us because we weren't aware of the
scope of the need,
how deep that ran.
It's particularly evident as we approach holidays. I would lay odds there isn't anyone in the entire state of Maryland who does more to ensure children have a happy Christmas that's safe and secure as much as possible than Dana Penny does. So, she is critical to our efforts to support these students.
It's interesting because from your corner and in your office, there's a lot of individual focus. There's and it has to be frustrating because when you go student by student in a school system this big, those individual instances start to build up. I mean, there's a lot of them.
I think that's the spirit of Washington County Public Schools, though. Each student is an individual. And so for each student, we want to meet their unique need. And so if we start looking at this in big groups or numbers, that could be very intimidating. But when we're looking at the kid in front of us, that's when we can identify what this particular student needs. My program's home and hospital teaching. So my students have either a medical or emotional condition that has limited their ability to attend school, but they're still entitled to access their education. And so what happens is after paperwork is received by a licensed provider, I will assign a teacher to provide educational services in their home for a period of time. And so this is arguably our most vulnerable population. These are sick kids, parents who may be at a breaking point financially and emotionally because all of the factors that go into managing a sick child can be very taxing. And so it's a unique circumstance every single time. Similarly with our students in transition, because no two are ever going to be the same. The way homelessness or illness impacts a child and their ability to access their instruction is profoundly unique and can fluctuate even day to day depending on their circumstances. So it is a very individual approach that we have to take. We do, I think, a really good job of having consistent approaches, but it does have to be specific to each student because otherwise if it's not personal, it's not meaningful. And the most important thing we can do is keep our students engaged in our school community and engaged in their learning because we want them to be successful.
If you're just joining us, this is Lunchtime Live, the third Thursday each month, a partnership between Washington County Public Schools and WJEJ. Today's show is sponsored by the Columbia Bank. My guest today, Bryan Johnson, Supervisor of Transportation with Washington County Public Schools, and Emily Jones from our Student Services Office, Pupil Personnel Worker and Coordinator of Home and Hospital Teaching. Who are those teachers who go into the home?
It's a variety of people who we do our very best to recruit the best of the best. So what I like to specifically do is target recently retired teachers, people that have had 30, 40 years in some cases of a scope of meeting different students' needs. But we prefer, if and when possible, to recruit certified teachers from the community. And we do our best to match a student to a teacher that will best meet their needs. And so, that process can include taking into account things like with Sonia's assistance, if it's a student who needs language resources or if it's a student with a particular IEP need, making sure that we're accommodating those IEP needs as well. So again, it's a very tailored and specific approach for each student. And I hand select the teachers in order to ensure that they are as fully trained and fully prepared to meet the changing needs of these students as it occurs.
But that's all daytime instruction, though. That's not a full-time teacher who's doing after school evening hours.
It can be contracted teachers that are teaching during the day at one of our schools,
okay.
and then in the evenings they go and provide instruction in the home. Sometimes we'll do it on Saturdays. It's the availability of the teacher and the student to really be able to do that instruction in a way that allows the student to best access it, particularly with students that are suffering prolonged or chronic illnesses where maybe they're receiving a chemo treatment or recovering from a surgery. having real hard deadlines about things. There's a flexibility that has to be at play for both the teacher and for the student's family.
That's a part of my next question. Some of these situations then these are not all necessarily short-term. These can turn into long-term situations.
Well, the intention of home and hospital teaching is a short-term program. It's not intended to be a long-term placement. The goal of HHT is to help students maintain connection to their academics until they're able to return to their regular school setting. The goal for that would always be a quicker amount of time than longer. However, unfortunately, some students have prolonged illness or injury that prohibits them from coming back as quickly as we would hope. But we're constantly monitoring that and developing plans to transition them back or to enhance the instruction that they're receiving for the period of time that they're out.
Can the community help you in any way, you and yours? It's one thing to have parents, grandparents, just community members come into a school to help cut out art projects or help with reading and things like that. This is a little more complicated than that.
Well, in terms of HHT specifically, I would say, the best community support is for our providers in the community. If they're not sure when they're meeting with a student if HHT would be a good fit, before they fill that form out, to contact me. I'm listed on that form, or the Director of Student Services, Jeremy Jacoby, and really just talk to us specifically about that student. And then maybe there is an alternative to home and hospital teaching. So in terms of community support, I really do want to thank our providers in the community. They do an outstanding job at supporting the needs medically of our students and communicating with us in order to have that collaboration. And I would ask they continue that. In terms of student services in general, the way that the community can help us is to, again, reinforce the importance of good school attendance. That positive attitude that showing up matters, being there every day counts. That's a culture that we need our community to embrace and support as well, for us to be successful in that message. We just actually this year hired a mental health resource coordinator, Shannon Cassidy. She was previously one of our school psychologists. And she's going to really be addressing the fact, in childhood, 1 in 5 adolescents between 13 and 17 have mental illness. And most of that starts by the age of 14. And so Shannon's goal is really going to be able to identify resources in the community and connect students who need those resources. Additionally, our school counselors do outstanding work with students. Helen Huffer is the supervisor this year, and they focus on academic, career, personal, social development. These are all critical aspects to student achievement. And so Student Services is really collaborating with these departments, the health department with Janice Howells, to ensure those immunizations are accurate for enrollment so that we're not keeping kids out of school based on an immunization need. Pre-K, kindergarten, 7th grade, please check your immunizations before you come for enrollment. And in regards to pre-K, Stacy Henson also, we work closely with, there are still openings available in pre-K, and regardless of income, all applications will be considered. So if a family is considering pre-K, we would highly suggest that, because good attendance starts as early as pre-K. Those habits are built in the early grades, and that's where we want to see that foundation.
When in doubt, call.
When in doubt,
call your office, call the school counseling office, call your school.
Yep. Student Services, like I said, we're a clearinghouse of resources. So even if it's not a specific issue to us, we will be able to direct you to the correct person. And we really do take pride in following through. There is not a single person in our department who is going to put you on hold and not get back to you. We are very consistent about making sure that we're getting you correct and timely information. And we want to make sure that we provide that service to all of our families. And we do that in collaboration with departments like Bryan's and Paula's and Janice's and Helen's.
Bryan, aside from the parents who are going to put kids on the buses every day, what would you say to the community about the work that you, your drivers, and your staff do, and how can the community make it a better school year?
Well, I think the biggest role that our community has is to be aware, certainly starting on September 3rd, that our buses and our kids are going to be out and about. Our kids are going to be walking to bus stops. They're going to be walking to schools. They're going to be riding the bus. They're going to be out there, and the buses, when they come back, that's going to impact some of the traffic flow. Things may slow down. It may even be a little bit slower as we're making sure everything is going as smooth as possible. We really need our community and our vehicle traffic to just be prepared to slow down and take your time. Know that when the red lights come on that school bus, that means that you need to stop. Pay attention to that. Don't assume that a student's not crossing or it doesn't need to happen. It's all about safety, and it starts really with just following the rules and taking the time and understanding that we need to get our kids to school safely, and it's all about the decisions that we make day in and day out.
New technology on the buses this year?
Nothing new.
Okay.
There's always new technologies that are out there. We do have one bus that we're piloting a tablet that would be able to potentially provide, in addition to messaging and turn-by-turn directions is really what we're looking for that thing to do. It has the capability for GPS, which we already have on our buses. So we're always trying out new technology, and if we see something that's going to be very value added, increase our safety or improve our operation, that's something we're going to take a look at.
And you have a full staff operating on the mechanical part of the buses too.
We do.
Keeping them running, keeping everything up to date and working just fine. The last thing we want is for a driver and his or her kids to be stranded somewhere.
We do. We have a top-notch fleet maintenance team. That's evident anytime you look at our buses and the condition that they are in. They work year-long to make sure those buses are not only running, but they do a lot of preventative maintenance. We don't want the bus on the side of the road reacting to it. We work hard to make sure that issues are taken care of before they arise.
Good deal. Good show. Out of time already. Bryan, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Good luck these next couple of weeks. Start of school. Emily Jones, how about you stepping in?
Well, thank you for having me. I would like to say hello to Ike Jones if he's listening.
Emily Jones is with the Student Services Office of Washington County Public Schools. Bryan is the Supervisor of Transportation. Today's show has been sponsored by the Columbia Bank. We're here the third Thursday each month, a partnership between Washington County Public Schools and WJEJ.